and I'm very happy to introduce to you today Dr. Brenda Bonnet from Ontario. A year ago last August, I was in St. Louis at the Canine Health Foundation Parent Club Health Conference, and Dr. Bonnet gave a very interesting talk there, and I immediately came home and I said, we really need to get her to come to our national and give a seminar. So here she is, and it's going to cover a wide range of very important information. We are videotaping it, and we will be making the videotape available in some format to be determined. So welcome, Dr. Bonnet, and there will be time for questions at the end, and possibly even throughout.
Absolutely. I wasn't cuddling up to you. I was trying to see if the mic would pick up for you as well, but I don't think it did. We have videotaping for us here today, and so if we run into any problems, we will switch over or do whatever. We hope for it to be quite interactive. We want people to participate and discuss with us. And I don't know, we were supposed to have a room mic, but I don't think we do, so you just have to speak up and I'll repeat the question if it happens that we're not picking it up. First of all, I want to say thank you to the French Bulldog Club for inviting me here. It's very exciting to be, it's always exciting to talk to breed clubs that are concerned about health and welfare. It's a lot of the work that I do, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you to all of you for your interest and concern for your dogs and your breed, because without you, we're nowhere. I can run around as an expert, but of course it requires people like you to make a big difference. So if we get started like these very active French Bulldogs here, I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I'm a veterinarian. I graduated at least a millennium ago, and was a practicing vet for a while, and then specialized in theriogenology, which I think you know is reproduction. I did a PhD in epidemiology, and was on faculty at the Ontario Veterinary College for many years. My research was very broad, ranging human-animal interactions and veterinary medical communication. I did work on pet overpopulation in the 90s here in the States with the National Council. But my main interest is in population health and applying appropriate techniques to large data sets. And through that, I ended up doing a lot of work in Sweden, where they have the Agri Insurance Company, which insures 350,000 dogs and 350,000 cats a year now, plus over 100,000 horses. And when you consider that Sweden is only 9 million people and less than 800,000 dogs, that database contains about 40% of all the dogs in Sweden. So I'm going to show you some of the data that we have from Sweden. And of course, what makes Swedish data relevant as well is, of course, it wasn't that long ago that Sweden mainly had only their native breeds of dogs. And so most of the breeds have been at some point imported in. So they're probably quite similar to your population in many ways. That is not my dog, that beautiful creature there. She is the granddaughter of a dog I had a photo taken with when I was at Agria years ago. They told me I had to have a new picture because I didn't look the same as back then, but I wouldn't care. But anyway, but I did have Ridgebacks and bred one litter, so I'm a totally bona fide breeder with one litter under my belt. But of course, I worked in Therio, so I helped a lot of people get their dogs pregnant and in whelp and whelping, and puppy cuddling really was my major, but you could only go so far in the veterinary world with that. And of course, according to some people's definition, I am a commercial breeder because I sold some of those puppies for money. So I have very, very broad background in these areas. I am now the CEO of the International Partnership for Dogs, which I'm going to tell you more about in a minute. And my email address is there, and you are always welcome to contact me. Is the sound kind of okay?
Yes.
It's terrible for me, but that's okay. I would like to ask about you. So first of all, how many of you own a French Bulldog? I won't ask how many. Okay, so we have all owners. How many of you are veterinarians or veterinary techs? So a couple. All right, I'll be watching what I say. How many of you are judges for French Bulldogs or others? Just a couple, okay. How many of you are breeders? And first, let's say you have ever bred a litter of dogs. So basically everybody, okay. How many of you had between 1 and 2 litters of French Bulldogs in the last 3 years? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How many of you had between 3 and 5 litters in the last 3 years? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I thought that was my cue. Yeah. If you're willing to tell me, how many of you had more, what did I say last, more than 5 litters? So I don't have to ask about more than 10 litters. So we had about 6 or 8 people with 3 to 5 litters. Are there any of the people here that are involved in performance with the French Bulldogs? 1, 2, great. The rest are out performing, I think, today, are they? Were you somewhere today doing wonderful things?
Sunday.
Okay. I have already taken a picture of your posters, and I have to talk to somebody who's in charge of that poster to make sure we can put it online. It's very fun and important, which we'll get to later. So my objectives today are to talk to you about genetic testing and as tools for breeding healthier dogs. I'm going to talk about all that's great about that and also the limitations. Then we'll move into talking about general and specific concerns for health and welfare in brachycephalics in general, but mostly in French Bulldogs. Present some data and evidence on prevalence and risk of disease in the breed and talk about that. And then I hope to, at the end, get to the point that says, what does this mean to all of us? Where do we go forward with this? Rather than just information for information's sake, might we do something collectively with IPFD, on your own, whatever. I had this in my goodie bag, as well as the fortune cookie, which I had a friend had just done a conference, and she'd done these bespoke messages of fortune cookies. So you're right, whoever did that, you're right on the cutting edge of goodies. But I've already sent it off to my friends in Sweden, so they're already planning, although I don't know if they can find anybody to make them over there. But this was in the goodie bag, and I thought this was really important. This is for your club here today, and those are very powerful words: protect, promote, and preserve the breed. So I'm going to keep those in mind as I go through this talk, and I hope you will too. So the International Partnership for Dogs came into being in 2014, and with a mission to enhance the health, well-being, and welfare of dogs. We are, I'll show you the logos of our starting partners in a minute, but a lot of kennel clubs are in on this, but it's very much meant to be multi-stakeholder, which includes anybody and everybody working in the world of dogs, because we think most dog problems are complex and need lots of stakeholders at the table to make a difference. It's international, mainly Europe and North America at the moment, but we have in the genetics portion, we have Australian with us, but we're always working to get more people. The main thing, sharing, collaborative, and participatory. It's not just us. IPFD is very small, and we are trying to get people together to do the work. We're big into tools and resources to empower other people to make a difference, and I guess if there's something good about us, we're sort of arm's length and independent. Even our partners aren't dictating what we do. So we bring in collective opinion and evidence that's not linked to any one organization, and we really try to be free of dog politics, or politics in general, but that seems to be a challenge in the world today. And we really believe in strength in numbers. So we'll start with two things: International Partnership for Dogs, the organization, and dogwellnet.com, the platform, which is our internet platform. These are some of our original and ongoing partners, and you'll see there that we have Agrio Djurförsäkring, it says there, it's the pet insurance company, the kennel clubs of Sweden, Finland, Norway, Germany, France, the UK. AKC is a sponsor of the genetics program. Ireland, OFA was one of our original partners. They're now a sponsor of the genetics portion. Mars Veterinary, which is now Wisdom Health, is with us. We also have non-paying partners like Vet Compass, which is a research veterinary data group in the UK, as well as the Journal of Canine Genetics and Epidemiology, and some breed clubs. And more coming in all the time, I would hope. We have two other breed clubs that are probably kennel clubs that are joining this fall. So on the website on DogWellNet, we want to present the efficient access to the best information. Research articles, breed club information, breeding strategies of breed clubs, news and information from around the world on the veterinary side, the research side, the more practical side. So a real information hub. But through that, our main goal is to connect the global stakeholders, veterinarians, vet techs, breeders, breed clubs, kennel clubs, the veterinary industry as is needed, organizations that are responsible for dog welfare, the whole gamut, and it also includes regulatory groups as well, because, as I say, they're all part and parcel of it. And the idea is to empower them to move forward and make a difference. Public information and a partnership resource. So this is the current homepage of dogwellnet.com, and we have latest articles. We have sections on international actions where you can go and see the latest information on brachycephalics or other major topics of interest internationally. The top line, the middle line there is latest articles. It's the newest things, and those scroll through. There's so much information. I'm not going to go through that today, and a little later I'm going to get to the International Partnership for Dogs harmonization of genetic testing. But for now, if I just talk a little bit more about other content on DogWellNet, we have a breeds database, and there's 1 million breed databases and breed information sites on the net, but the kind of information we're really trying to bring in is international breed clubs, any health programs they are having, some of the Scandinavian clubs, and in the UK they're building real health strategy documents, and of course there's more similarities than differences for breeds in different parts of the world. I'm a big believer of not reinventing the wheel, so if you're going to do a health strategy, why not know who's doing what where elsewhere, learn from their mistakes or poach their information and use it. So if your club has done health surveys, any kind of documents that you do, we're happy to put them there. We also put in standards and changes to standards, etc. There is an area for the Swedish insurance database. All the data, there's 130 breeds in there right now. Starting literally right now, we're starting to put in the new data for 2011 to 2016, which I will show you some as we go along. And that is accessible to people who sign on as a member to DogWellNet and say that they are a breed club health rep or a breed club person. Then you can have the ability to download them as if you're as a participating group. almost everything is free for everybody. As a guest, you can go to DogWellNet and see almost everything, but we are building a certain number of resources where you need to be a collaborator or a partner to see them. Surprisingly, some people, some even kennel clubs say to me, if it's free for all, why would I pay? And of course, we can hope for leadership, but we can't force it. We also have these breed-specific breeding strategies, some of them translated from other countries and templates. There's the harmonization of genetic testing, which we'll come to in a minute. And as I said, we have a very large section on the brachycephalic issue because this is huge, especially over in Europe right now, from multi-stakeholder groups, including veterinarians. And there's proclamations and position statements coming out every month, it seems. So we're trying to build that and collect it. We also have collected quite a number of PowerPoint presentations that people like me, other experts have done at various meetings, and there's some really good stuff there that's available for people to look at. One of the other major activities of the International Partnership for Dogs is the International Dog Health Workshops. The first one was in Sweden in 2012, which was really the birthplace of the IPFD. We weren't there yet then. The second one was in Germany, hosted by the German Kennel Club. The third one was last May in Paris, hosted by the French Kennel Club. And then that one, the third International Dog Health Workshop, Paris, it was lovely. I'm sorry you missed it. 140 decision leaders. This isn't for 2,000 people. This is for people who are the heads of kennel clubs, the geneticists and breeding advisors at kennel clubs, some breed club representatives, industry representatives, regulators, heads of veterinary organizations, etc. The idea of the people that can go out and do something after this. And it's very much a workshop. It's not a lot of lectures. It's what are the key issues in dog health and welfare? What are the priorities that need to be addressed at an international level? And what do we need to do about them? So it's all about information, collaboration, and action. And the fourth dog health workshop is in the UK, in Old Windsor, the end of May, beginning of June. And we are separately also organizing a meeting of the heads of kennel clubs in Stockholm at the end of June to move from all the breeders and breed clubs and reps and health people and everything they do at that workshop to go to the heads of the kennel clubs and say, now what are you going to do about it, or how's that going to work? And that's specifically on genetic testing. So here's the idea. We're all in this together and we have to partner to have success. And we need to communicate. A colleague of mine in Sweden gave me that picture. It's her son and one of her beautiful Shelties. And when I said, can I use it, she was very hesitant. And I said, why are you hesitant? Because it's such a great picture and I want to use it. And she says, well, it's a really ugly hat, and he has it on upside down and backwards. And I said, well, maybe that's a good allegory for communication in the dog world, that we're all starting out a little upside down and backwards. So let's start talking about genetic testing. First of all, why is it done? I know most of you in this room are pretty educated in this, and you can jump in if I'm heading anything down the wrong path. But it's one of the key problems that they discovered in human genetic testing, and they're still fighting with it. And it's becoming very obvious to us as we work. A lot of people who say, oh, I'm going to DNA test my dog. They don't even really know what they mean by that. They've heard about DNA on CSI and these other shows, and so they know that it totally only takes like 4 minutes to get a full DNA scan on anybody. It's 100% correct and doesn't seem to cost anything. Okay, we know that's not the case, right? But they also are influenced, I don't know how it is in the States, but 23andMe and Ancestry.com and a lot of people now, it's like am I German or Italian? Am I supposed to be eating sauerkraut or pasta? You know, it's this inheritance thing in people. And it's confusing. So one of the things, we are building a tool to help people go through and understand what they should do. And I think veterinarians are dealing with that. Sure, if you have an educated breeder who comes in and says, I've got these 2 dogs I'm going to breed and I want a DNA test, you know what they're looking for. But an owner that just walks in and say, hey doc, should I do a DNA test? It's like there's a lot of options out there. So for the individual animal or the individual owner, maybe what they're really looking for is a breed background or a heritage check if it's not a purebred dog or they're not sure it's a purebred dog, or sometimes people know that they have a purebred doodle, but they would still like to find out more about it. And in individual animals, of course, as veterinarians, we can be presented with sick animals, and we may be doing certain DNA tests to confirm or rule out our suspicion of what's wrong, and also to inform therapy. And I think coming down the road, there will be newer and newer, even chemotherapies that only work for certain dogs, and there may be a genetic test that you can determine, yeah, this might work on your dog, or no, we don't need to go there. So that's the individual animal situation. As breeders, you know, you're most often doing genetic testing to determine risk or to reduce risk of dogs passing on bad genes to their offspring. And even there, that sounds very simple and straightforward, but now we're confused by 200 plus test panels that may or may not have anything to do with your breed. And should you get them done, and people suggesting, of course, you can test absolutely everything and you'll know everything wrong with your animal. So even in that breeding situation, we can be a little overwhelmed. Then we can have people that are thinking at the breed or population level. What's the risk in our breed? What's the prevalence of these conditions in our breed? And I know Calvin and I were talking yesterday about some of the tests that are done, and it's very hard right now to get any good data on the true prevalence of carriers in a breed. I'll try and talk a little bit more about that later if we have time. And of course, everybody's talking about diversity, breed diversity, genetic diversity. How are we going to get that? How are we going to keep that? Whatever. And it's a different way of testing than for these risk reductions. Again, as veterinarians, we're looking at it from the clinical individual side, but also from the prevalence and preventive medicine side. And of course, there is some possibility of promoting these tests in the veterinary industry rather than individual veterinarians. So that's their area. And then when it comes to, we can call it forensics, you know, if these programs to collect dog poop and identify the dog and link it to the owner or whatever. But there's also other forensics where there's accidents or attacks or whatever. And there's also dog identification and parentage issues, which are being looked at more and more by kennel clubs. Kennel clubs are moving towards expanding their pedigree databases to include pedigree and health data. And in Sweden and Finland, for example, they have like 35 generations of pedigree data together with health data like hip x-rays and eye exams and elbow x-rays over the years. They're linking test results into pedigree information for the calculating of breeding indices like breeding values and coefficients of inbreeding, etc. It's going into the permanent record of the dog. So we better be sure that the test result came from that dog, that that dog came from the parents and the grandparents it's said to, and that the test information is absolutely accurate. And I think everybody in this room knows that those accuracy concerns, even about dog identification and pedigrees, are not 100% across the board in accuracy. But it's going to be amplified if we start using wrong information in breeding material. So in the ideal world, we have fabulous genetic test providers. We have good industry providing perfect tests at a reasonable cost. The tests are fully validated not only by breed but by region and country. And we have great genetic advice that'll tell us what to do with the results of those tests. But at the moment, I guess I can say that's a bit of a dream. I was talking with a genetics professor in Ireland who's worked in cattle, and he says, well, what's this, these dogs? He says, because it's not enough to have one population that you created a test on and validated the test. It has to be in different countries, and it has to be done by regions within country, and it has to be done in all these different areas. Otherwise, it's not validated. And I said, well, by your standards, we have no validated tests, but in reality, we never will, not at that level. So we know we don't have that. That's just a dream. And now we are working on something called the Harmonization of Genetic Testing for Dogs. It's a collaborative open access online resource. There's a quality testing database for labs to provide the information so we can determine who they are and are they doing a good job. And it will be linked with the genetic counseling resource. This is supported by AKC and CHF and all our other IPFD partners. And believe me, it's a work in progress. Why do we need it? I think you know there's exploding numbers of tests and labs and sales pitches and recommendations. How do breeders make sense of all that? There's individual owners, breeders, vets, kennel clubs. We're all challenged to find the information. You can find really fancy websites and you can't find a human being associated with them. You don't know what they're doing. And even good DNA test providers are challenged to distinguish themselves from these fancy websites or new people on the block. And quite honest, even some of the good DNA test providers are a little sneaky in some of the things that they're doing. There's no quality control system for DNA testing in veterinary medicine. There's no standardized testing. There's no group that's taking charge of this, or no rules and no regulations. And it's almost all of it's direct to consumer. So as opposed to in human medicine where the majority is done through a doctor until recently, almost everything in veterinary medicine is direct to consumer, so the consumer can purchase whatever, whenever, and then maybe too late go to the vet and say, should I have done that? So that means there's no oversight for commercial test providers. There's really no impetus for them to do a good job or to, other than marketing. There's nobody keeping track on them. There's no transparency. Many of them, even the good ones, before they started working with us, many of them had no information online about their quality assurance programs, their genetic counseling work, etc. So, and there's a lot of providers that come and go. So even the good labs, there's not very much incentive for them to keep doing a really good job if the consumers just buy the cheapest test that's available. If there's a new kid on the block and there's new tests available and they're offering them for $1 or $5 or whatever cheaper, and everybody runs and starts using them, it's not good. Been dealing recently with a lab in the Czech Republic that has popped up, and nobody knows who owns it. Nobody knows what they're doing, except that they are offering a new Merle test in a certain group of breeds of dogs that's way better than anything else that's been there, although there's nothing published and they won't share and they don't have any information, and it's cheaper. And unfortunately, breeders and breed clubs can be pretty quick to jump on that bandwagon, maybe because of the money side of it. So we get inconsistent results, we get reports that are hard to understand. When we started building this database, my project director is Aimee Llewellyn-Zadie, and she was formerly the head of the health unit at the UK Kennel Club. She really knows this stuff, and we're confused. Is this the same test at this lab and this lab? They call it that. They call it that. The eye diseases are a mess. So even bringing consistency to how these described will be helpful, let alone the lack of validation and variable customer support and what they say about the counseling.
Pardon me, when you say eye diseases are a mess, can you please explain that?
The nomenclature across labs. So PRA 1, 2, 3, 4, PRCD 1, 2, 3, 4, juvenile cataracts versus persistent juvenile cataracts versus hereditary cataracts versus that kind of thing.
Recently I've heard that there's a form of a cataract behind the retina that a specialist may see, but a general practitioner would not.
Oh, well, I think there's and I'm not getting into the diseases or whatever at this point. This is about the tests and who's selling the tests and what they're calling them. But there is certainly a concern among ophthalmologists, as DNA tests for eyes have become very popular, that people think they don't need to go to a veterinary ophthalmologist or go to eye screening for the eye exam. And of course, there's many conditions of the eye that are not going to be picked up on a DNA test, but will be picked up by either a regular veterinarian or a specialist veterinarian. And it's another concern where everybody thinks, oh, DNA, it's better than anything. I'd just do a couple DNA tests and we'll be good to go. But the problems in eyes in your breed with dry eyes or corneal ulcers or weird eyelashes or entropion or ectropion, none of that's DNA, right? Like, and that, the bulging of the eyes and the conformation around the eyes is going to cause more problems in more dogs. That has nothing to do with DNA testing. So, I mean, if you say I DNA tested my dog and it's cataract free, that doesn't mean it has good eyes or couldn't have other problems. So, sorry, was somebody saying something? Okay. The problem is if there's too many bad actors out there, if there's too many problems with the genetic testing labs and people get frustrated with wrong results, you're going to start losing confidence in genetic testing in general. And of course it offers a great potential. Used properly, in the right way, it offers a great potential. It's not a silver bullet. But we don't want people to just say, oh, all the labs are cheaters and all the tests are crap or whatever they would do. We want to separate the wheat from the chaff and use it properly and not lose out on this important resource. Why IPFD? Because we're independent and multi-stakeholder and international, we are the ones who can pull this together, cross the borders, cross the different areas, and speak out when needed. And I'll give you one example. If you go to the harmonization homepage, which looks like this, and down in the on the right hand side there's something that's called IPFD Weighs In. There was recently an article in Nature, which is an important scientific journal. It was just a commentary by a veterinarian and a genetics researcher trashing everything to do with genetic testing in dogs. It was called Pet Genomics Runs Wild. And while their concerns about the genetic testing world were totally valid, almost everything they said was realistic and it was a problem, they chose not to give anything on the other side, not to talk about our initiative or the CHF initiative training geneticists or other people that are working very hard to improve genetic testing. And so that was a missed opportunity, but of course because it was so inflammatory, it was picked up by popular press and now everybody's, oh, it's all a disaster. So we were able to come in and give the middle opinion. Yes, their concerns are totally valid, nothing wrong there. However, maybe people would like to know about this and this that people are doing in breed clubs that are trying to do the right thing and doing well, because as you know, it's too easy to trash everybody and everything rather than say, well, maybe people are trying to make a difference. So again, I won't go through, it's all our Kennel Club partners, AKC, CHF, all these labs that are listed in the middle are labs that have participated with us, providing data and providing information on their tests and testing. And as I say, just creating this database, we've gone back to some of these labs and gone, you don't have the breed names right, you don't have the disease names right, you haven't specified the mutation, etc., etc. So we can whip them into shape a little bit. And I'm happy to say that through being our partner and working on this just today, the French Kennel Club has announced their requirements for genetic testing related to putting information into their databases. And it includes about animal identification and sample identification, and that the sample should be taken by a veterinarian with the dog identified. And it goes on and it talks about lab quality and includes that the lab should have ISO certification and should be part of the harmonization of genetic testing for dogs database, because if they're not in there, not willing to be transparent about their procedures and processes and quality, why not? So that's a great boost for us, and we hope most of our partners will follow suit with that, because they run into problems too about, well, you accept this lab but not that lab. So they're finding that they need to make these requirements so people understand it's the same for everybody. You know, and I mean, all the labs report where people say you're a bad lab because I sent the, you know, the breeder sent to this lab and I sent to this lab and we got a different answer. And then when they do the dog ID, they say, well, first of all, it's not even the same dog. The sample's not from the same dog. And second of all, whatever else is happening. So I think if we work together, we can make a difference. So our resource is to catalog the information provided by the genetic test providers, describe their quality assurance, their activities, their expertise, and their resources. We are building expert panels that will review the information from the labs and about the tests, and coordinating a program for proficiency testing, sharing samples to see if they're doing it right. And a lot of new resources for genetic counseling and education to support both the consumers and the researchers, really. Jan wanted me to walk you through it a little bit. I hope you all go online and have a look for yourself, but I'll just do this quickly. You go to dogwellnet.com and you click on harmonization. This takes you to the harmonization page. You have 3 boxes there: search by breed, search by test, search by lab. Let's say you did search by breed and you started to type something into the search box. Then if you started to type in French, then French Bulldog would come up and you could click on that. And it would immediately give you a list of all the tests that are being sold by any one of the labs in our database. So we don't have every single lab in the world in there yet. We have a lot of the major ones. Because it's there doesn't mean it's a test you need to do in your dog. It just means somebody would be willing to sell you that test. It's in the lab. So there's this list of tests. Say that you clicked on primary hereditary cataract, which is juvenile cataracts, etc. You would first get up generic phene data. Let me get out of your way there. The first thing you see is all the breeds for which this test is done. If I had chosen DM, the number of breeds would have filled the whole screen, because everybody is selling DM to everybody, but that's a whole nother story. The buttons underneath are labs which offer the test. And then it starts to go into details about the test or the phene, the characteristic. It could be a coat color or something, specifying the mutations, the disease description, if anybody has patents or research. It also includes references to research that has been done and whether or not the test has been validated within different breeds. And then below it lists the labs that offer the test. And most of our genetic test providers haven't been great on filling that in yet, but when they fill it in, we are asking them to put in the genetic counseling they do, anything specific for that breed. Do they do a different mutation or a different test for that breed versus other breeds, so the information will eventually be in there. And without going into it, you can also click on those labs, and it goes through and tells you about the lab and who the people are and what their qualifications are, and whether the lab has ISO accreditation or other accreditations. A ton of information in there on the lab as well. So we're building that as we go, but without going into all the information on the labs, I'd like now to talk more about the diseases and the tests with French Bulldogs. So these were the tests that were listed as available, and as I said, it just means one of these labs will sell you this test. It doesn't mean that anybody has proven that this is a significant problem in your breed. And as we go on into development, we are going to do more test evaluation, making sure the test results are valid and valid for specific diseases. We're going to build genetic advice and counseling into this. Some of it is online resources for consumers and some through our expert panels. And what we really want to do is more breed-specific content. So my staff and I building some of the information for this talk, well, a lot more than I'm going to give actually, are going to put a section into the breed database for the French Bulldog on more information that we have on French Bulldogs. But we can move ahead on this, and I've been talking to Diane Brown at CHF about working together with breed clubs to build breed-specific content, to prioritize questions to our expert panels for breeds that are really working on this or really interested in this, think that it's key. And we've had a couple of breed clubs donating through CHF directly to the harmonization project, and we haven't set it up as a breed-specific effort, but it's something we could do in the future as a little plug. So these DNA tests are available, but do they help with the most important concerns of French Bulldogs? Do any of you know of any problems in French Bulldogs that aren't listed there?
Soft palate.
Soft palate, BOS, breathing, eyes, spines, etc., right? So the CHF lists these as the top 10 canine health concerns, all breeds, right? And this is related, I mean, these aren't valid stats necessarily in terms of numbers, but this is what they have gotten back from breed clubs. Very few of those have DNA tests for them. Very few in any breed. And so in brachycephalics, the things we know are important, BOS, breathing problems, eyes, locomotor, spine problems, they're not in there at all. So we're back again to this concern. We don't want people thinking just because they did a DNA test or all the available DNA tests for their breed, they now know the health picture in their breed. So how do we deal with that? Well, one of the problems that we have is the easiest thing for a researcher to find is a simple autosomally recessive individual single gene disease disorder. And they're working on them primarily because they get funding, a lot of them primarily because they get funding for human diseases. So just because they find a gene in your breed, it doesn't mean that's an important disease for your breed. What it does mean is some enterprising lab will develop a test for it and offer to sell it to you. And so it's this crazy world. And of course the complex diseases, not only complex genetically because they're controlled by multiple genes and maybe multiple different locations, but they're also strongly affected by environment. They're not going to have a DNA test for them anytime soon. That's just not the way that DNA testing and research is going. But there'll be a few wild things coming up. There's some genome-wide testing that's going to bring some interesting things in, maybe even for your breed, but it's probably not going to be a silver bullet. So we don't want this overemphasis on DNA tests to think they're going to fix the world for us, even though they're nice and easy, and even though breeders can say, look, I'm a good breeder, I did DNA testing. And I'm not sure how much the public and the owners get swayed by that. Sounds good. They spent money and they paid it. And of course, the other problem in the real world is if you have been a good breeder, it's good if breeders test for DNA that's a good tests available in their breed. It's a good thing. You don't want to perpetuate these rare single gene disorders. However, if you've already spent $200, $300, I don't know how much it costs. If you test a litter, it's a lot of money. Do you have money left over to do anything else? It's a challenging situation. And of course, we all know about this, right? Decision making by Facebook. There's a storm on Facebook. This is the most important disease. This is a new test. This is a new whatever. This is a great lab. This is cheaper. All of a sudden, we have a new health direction for a breed just so people can cope. Everybody is dealing with this all over the world, and it is not probably improving health management in our breeds. Unless a lot of you feel that the people who are the loudest on Facebook are generally the most knowledgeable people in your breed. Or not. Okay. So let's look at some data, and now I warn you that this is the shocking part of the presentation. These are mainly data from the Swedish insurance company. They are very similar to data I could have shown you from England and vet practice records through Vet Compass. But they are looking at what are the most common conditions in French Bulldogs and what is the risk in French Bulldogs compared to all breeds of dogs together. So the first thing, it's called total morbidity. This is whether dogs had one or more visits to a veterinarian. This is over 6 years. So a dog could have gone to the veterinarian 10 times a year for 6 years, but this first graph is just, did they have at least one significant veterinary event? This is veterinary insurance, so to be in here, the diagnosis comes from a veterinarian, but it has to come above the deductible. The deductible is not that high in Sweden, and maybe some of you have experienced that veterinary care is quite expensive, maybe. And so this captures a lot of significant events. Anything where there's going to have been a workup, some blood work done, some x-rays done, some follow-up done, because the receipts for the veterinary visits are put together for a period of 125 days. So anything, anything that's a significant event for the dog would be in there. So this is just counting it once. French Bulldogs are 1.45 times more likely to have at least one major veterinary event in this period of time than all breeds put together. So they are definitely getting more veterinary care. And as I say, this is each dog counted once, regardless how many times it went. So what are they going in for? So this is veterinary care events, and I'm not sure you can read it. The red bar is for the French Bulldog, and the blue bar is for all breeds of dogs combined. And so you can see that the most common conditions are digestive, skin, locomotor, eyes, injury, symptom whole body, which could be pain or something like that, ear problems. Then we have cancer, immunological problems, reproductive problems, respiratory upper problems, neurologic, and I won't go through the rest. So that's how common these diseases are. So even if you were using this to educate your puppies, and we're going to get to more specific diagnoses in a minute, your puppy buyers, if you wanted to educate them, you'd say these are the kinds of things they're looking out for. So where you have a condition like cancer, if you see cancer, and I guess I can walk over here for the video, the two lines are almost exactly the same length. So you wouldn't say that the breed is getting cancer because it's a French Bulldog, it's just getting cancer because it's a dog, and dogs get cancer, and it's getting it at the same rate. Where the red lines are going past the blue line, that means the French Bulldogs are experiencing those conditions at a higher rate than all breeds of dogs. And the further the difference, the bigger the risk. So I just have to check if I put the next slide in there. So when I get to the specific diagnoses, we flip that and we give you the pure risk, and you'll see which ones are the really big ones. But you can already see there that the red line for eyes is way past the blue line for eyes, like for all breeds and that sort of thing. This is more specific conditions. So the first one is vomiting and gastroenteritis, vomiting, diarrhea, that sort of thing. All dogs vomit and get diarrhea for various reasons, but for some reasons, French bulldogs there, it's even more common. So just in terms of commonness, vomiting and diarrhea, otitis, dermatitis, and then we have, if we go, this will be available, you can look at it in more detail later. Corneal ulcers and other eye problems are in there a lot. Vertebral problems are in there a lot. Skin problems are in there, and when I flip it around, you'll really see. And we're down to, in terms of the more common ones, the knee and the patella is there, more eye problems. Here is cystitis and urethritis, and so we would think that maybe the cystinuria is contained in there. And you can see that it's in this top 30 or whatever number of diagnoses, but down here, not compared to the commonness of how many dogs are there. And so again, each dog is counted only once in each of these. So if we had a corneal ulcer situation and perhaps the dog went to the vet 25 times for a corneal ulcer, in these stats it's only counted once. So when we flip this on its head, now the yellow line is the risk in all breeds, and the red bars are for the French bulldogs. And it's probably hard for you to see, French bulldogs are 20 times more likely to have a major veterinary care event for malformation, development, respiratory problems in the upper respiratory tract. This diagnosis is mainly young animals. It's malformation and developmental problems, so that would be used mostly in younger animals, not in a chronic situation. And again, so that's a massive increased risk. There's many breeds of dogs that don't have a condition for which they're 20 times increased risk compared to all breeds. Many breeds, maybe they have something 2 times. So there's no question that there's a massive increased risk here. And you'll see number 3 is corneal ulcer, number 5 is cornea and sclera, the next one is trauma and eyeball, so there's lots of eye problems there. In the breathing, the first one is respiratory upper. We have aspiration pneumonia, esophagus, breathing problems, etc. So there's a lot of specific diagnoses there that are going to be part of the BOAS situation or problem. And then we have also some of the locomotor issues. So these are fairly obvious stats. I mean, this is what you see is what you get. Dogs counted once, so in that way it's conservative. The dogs probably had more events than that. These are data from last time, which was 2006 to 2011, and really basically the same pattern. So no difference in that 12-year period of time, which we wouldn't really have expected. This is death. So many, about 3/4 of the dogs have both healthcare insurance and death insurance, life insurance. They tend to drop their life insurance after 10 or 12 years of age. So this is probably rate and risk of death in dogs under 12 years of age or under 10 years of age.
I think maybe you should define BOAS.
Okay, brachycephalic obstructive syndrome, airway syndrome, which also includes a lot of other issues, the palate problem and the nares problem and anything that compromises breathing, but it's also associated with issues in the chest and actually also spinal issues and that sort of thing. So when we use these stats, we say to people, when you start looking at these conditions that the dogs get frequently, how bad are they? Chronic, or just once or twice, or that goes on their whole life, or does it actually kill them? So when we start to look at these mortality stats or death stats, we see that dogs are dying or being euthanized for problems like locomotor problems. So that's going to include everything, spinal, patella, anything to do with it. And again, this number is a little hard to see, but it's 40, 60, 80 times more likely to die or be euthanized for a locomotor problem than other breeds. So that's pretty significant. And again, this is death statistics. Almost 15 times more likely to die or be euthanized for an upper respiratory tract problem, and 4 times more likely to die or be euthanized for an eye problem. So these aren't just inconvenient problems, they have bad eyes, they are actually so bad that it's resulting in the death of the dog. So when we compare them to other breeds, there's no question that they have a significantly increased risk for quite a number of conditions. And when we get even more specific in that locomotor, it's disc and vertebral problems. So over 50 times more likely to die or be euthanized for a disc or vertebral problem than other breeds of dogs. And you need to know that there's a lot of dachshunds in Sweden. So there's a lot of other breeds in the other breeds that could be dying of disc and vertebral problems. But unfortunately, the French Bulldog is probably even beating them out. You have epilepsy, again, the 15 times more likely to die for a breathing problem. Some of these things like ataxia and collapse are very general. We don't know what that is. Maybe the dog collapsed at home, and by the time they brought it in, they couldn't really figure out why it collapsed. It could be BOAS, it could be a breathing thing that they collapsed, or it could be spinal. So some of these, but in these, obviously dogs only die once. They only get one diagnosis for the death. So these are all different dogs. Spinal is in there again, and this depends a little bit on how the veterinarian defines it. Not in Sweden, but in North America, there's a lot of discussion about French bulldogs and insurance companies refusing to insure them because of all of these problems with the palate, the problem with cesarean sections and complications. So the insurance companies, either the insurance will be incredibly expensive or they will not cover them because they know they are at such high risk. One of the interesting things we've done with the insurance statistics this time, in Sweden, 80% of dogs in Sweden are registered with the Swedish Kennel Club. Very high prevalence of pedigree dogs in Sweden. But even then, it's slightly changing, and they are starting to get some unregistered dogs in there. For a lot of breeds, less than 10% of dogs are unregistered. They're close to 100% registered. And of course, at any time, we could have some young dogs who just haven't gotten their registration into the database yet. But in the French Bulldogs, 27%, this is for life insured dogs, and for veterinary care insured dogs, it's 35% of dogs do not have a registration number with the Swedish Kennel Club. And we have a lot of breed clubs, even though they're trying hard health-wise, they tend to say, oh, the sick ones are all the unregistered ones. The sick ones are the bad ones coming in. And these data would suggest not, that in fact the mortality rate is higher in the registered dogs than the unregistered dogs. And some of that we have these same stats for veterinary care, and of course you can question maybe if someone has an unregistered dog, they don't take them to the vet as often. But people with life insurance are generally going to be reported into these data. So we're starting to have indication that the problems also exist in the registered dogs. So what does that mean about registered? Did you have any questions about that before I move on? So what about these registered and unregistered dogs? Because this is another problem. How many of you are aware of the increasing number of French Bulldogs in the world? That numbers of owned French Bulldogs have gone way up. Okay. You tell me if my stats, you already knew all this and it didn't surprise you. I'm very interested to hear. So here we are in the UK, and this is kind of cloudy for me, but I'm hoping it's clearer for you. This is from, I just have to go over here to say, this is from 2008 to 2017, and the increase in the number of French Bulldogs. I'll just read you this top one. The popularity of the breed has seen an unprecedented rise in recent years, with a 44% increase from 2016 to 2017 alone, and a staggering 2,964% increase over the last 10 years. Okay? And as Caroline Kisco, who's my IPFD co-chairman, and she's at the Kennel Club, nobody's ever seen this in a breed before, not at this level. We've seen breeds get popular, but nothing like this. And of course, we're going to talk a bit more about what does that mean. Well, one of the things that is interesting is in the UK, in the Kennel Club, 30% of dogs in the UK are registered. So there's another 70% of dogs not in this data. And they're accredited breeders in the UK. They account for 3% of the puppies. So the people that are really working with the kennel clubs. Here's Finnish Kennel Club data. Not nearly the numbers into the 20,000s, but basically the same pattern. Swedish Kennel Club data, as I say, not nearly as high numbers, but the same pattern. That's males and females at the bottom and the whole breed at the top. French Kennel Club, from 1,585 to 6,228 since 2000. And here's your data. AKC registrations in French Bulldogs, thanks to Jan for sharing this with me, from 1970 to 2017. So Jan tells me that she got her first French Bulldog here and had a lot of trouble to even find one to buy. And some of you might have been coming in the 90s, still not so common. If you look here, even in 2012 to 2014, it's doubled since then. And in 2017, you're up to 24,293 French Bulldogs registered in 2017 with the AKC. So we're not going to do the math today, but how do you go from this many dogs to this many dogs? How many generations is that? How many litters is that? How many dogs per litter? So you guys kind of know the dogs per litter. Now at the beginning I asked you, and most of the people in this room said they were breeding less than 5, less than 3 litters in the space of 3 years. So you have 600 members in the French Bulldog Club. How many of this 24,293 do you think came from your club? I want to charge you to go away and figure this out. Like, I would love you to come back and say, as best as we can tell, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, but it can't be much more than that, can it? But you tell me. There's another breed club working on this kind of information, not French Bulldogs at all, but they charge somebody to go and get the pedigree data, get the data actually from AKC. And they know the names, and you can figure it out, and you can figure out where they came from. And in that breed, they haven't finished the work, but they're estimating that less than 10% of the dogs came from people associated with a club. So what does that mean? What does that mean when we look at how to control health or whatever? Well, one of the things it means to me as I travel around the world, the Belgian government got really upset about problems in pedigree dogs, and they charged the Belgian Kennel Club to create a health pedigree database to provide breeding indices for breeders so that they could clean up these problems. They also gave them a whole whack of money, and in the space of a year and a half, They have a full-on, they're ready to go with creating this database. They're demanding DNA identification on every dog, and they're building this health database. Everybody, the government and the Kennel Club, know that the Belgian Kennel Club registered dogs account for approximately 20% of all the dogs in Belgium. What about the other 80%? I mean, they're not coming under the auspices of these breeding controls. And so it's a really complex problem. 20% is starting to be the average for most countries other than the Scandinavian ones that are much higher with pedigree dogs. And I think it's similar in the AKC. The AKC doesn't totally share their data, but we had data from breed clubs from quite a few years ago that said that, I don't know, I shouldn't say because we're guessing. It would be good to look at the data, because what does this mean? Tell me, where did these puppies come from?
The question I have is,
Just a second.
what defines pedigree?
Well, these are just registered dogs. So, of course, theoretically, they have an AKC pedigree that they were able to say that these dogs came from AKC parents, right? However, AKC registers them, same for your dogs or other dogs. We had somebody over here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I'm from England, and I actually analysed the breed registration for 2017, because we didn't get the journal that comes out, and the colours that are registered. And in 2017, there were 6,141 litters, and the colours were 43% were blue, 18% were brindle, 32% were fawn, but that also includes blue fawn, and some will say they're actually fawn when they're not, and then just 6% were pied.
Okay.
So where they're all coming from, colour not recognised. And we can look through the litters, and of those 6,000 litters, maybe 5, 6, 7 are show people. The rest are colour not recognised breeders.
Right. So that's even lower than the 3% that the UK says across the board. The really good breeders account for.
Can I just correct that? Assured breeders can breed non-recognised colours.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's unfortunate, but they can.
So the colors is one issue. So there was some comments from the back on where you think these puppies are coming from?
Color breeders, backyard breeders, whoever wants to make a quick buck. A lot of people are also selling a little bit higher money with full registration because everybody thinks they can make a quick buck.
Yeah.
There's very few of us that are actually doing things right in the club. Very few.
Right.
That's it.
So you think there's a few people within the club breeding a lot of dogs?
Oh, no. The club is, we're all good.
We're all good. Okay, there's nobody in the club breeding a lot of dogs. That's good to know. Maybe one or two, but they're not here, so we won't go into that. No, I mean, the thing that's interesting to me is theoretically if these pedigrees are correct, and Jan is suggesting, she would love to believe they're all coming in from Eastern Europe. But of course, if you look at all the European countries, they're all increasing. England can't be sending them all here because they're all in England, etc. So I think they're mostly coming from American dogs. But what does that mean? Did they originally come from a club member who bred a dog and sold it to somebody who they didn't know they were selling it to? Is this happening in here? I don't have the answers for you, but it's something, this is a major issue in your breed. Yes?
Veterinary public health in Los Angeles is most of the dogs that are coming in from Asia. And they're coming in at 2 months, 3 months with fake papers that say they're vaccinated with rabies, etc. They're bringing in distemper, diseases like that.
There's certainly that is happening. I mean, dogs are coming from all over everywhere and mixing and whatever. And we know that in Canada, I know that it's easier to bring in a truckload of rescues from Honduras than it is to send a really well-registered dog in, because they fall between the cracks or whatever.
Yeah. Living in Miami, I see another big problem, because people are importing, and they're importing a lot. And I am seeing people importing pregnant females at the end of the pregnancy. Okay, and I see this on Instagram, I see this on Facebook, and two particular cases was a pregnant female that delivered 5 days later 11 puppies. She just got off the plane and delivered the puppies.
And I promised I wasn't going to talk politics, but will those dogs have U.S. citizenship? AKC registration? I don't know. I can't figure that one out. Anyway, this is shocking, disturbing. Sometimes the breed clubs want to say it's not our fault or our problem, but if you aren't the stewards for this breed, who will be? I want to really fast go through some of the influences that we're looking at. The reason we need to look at these influences is veterinary organizations around the world are looking at these stats and they're really freaking out, okay? And I want to explain something else. One of the things I run into, we have a big issue going on with pugs in Sweden, and the breeders saying they're fine, very few of them are sick, and the veterinarians saying they're all sick, just some are sicker than most. But what we have to remember is what we just said. You people in the club at the shows, you're seeing maybe this many dogs, not even this many dogs, right? And you say, well, they're pretty good, or even many in this room go, well, they do have some problems that we need to deal with. The veterinarians are hopefully seeing all of these, and probably not seeing all of them, but they're seeing that range. And the people that are buying them, they don't differentiate registered versus unregistered and whatever. So these are the ones that got into AKC. How many more are out there with people who say, oh, I got papers, whatever the heck that means. So people are concerned. This is an epidemic. This is an epidemic of sick dogs. This is an epidemic of dogs that have significant welfare problems. And as much as I will put as much pressure as anybody else on any breed club to take stewardship for their breed really seriously and do their best, I don't think that the 3% can fix the 100%. So, but we need to be open about this. We need to calculate these statistics. We need to communicate with the government or whoever how many dogs are coming from, because they're really blaming the show breeders for what the dogs look like. They're blaming the show breeders that this is what people want. What you either change your standard or how you apply your standard in the ring sets the norm. Well, we also know, and I'm going to go through this very quickly because I'm sure most of you have seen this stuff. We have issues like Disney, and Disney has just come out with a new pug movie, and a lot of welfare groups really tried to influence them to reduce the marketing from it, and they did some, but we see actual increases in stats following things like that. Of course, we know bulldogs were influenced by that. We know pugs were influenced by Paris Hilton. We know that everybody wants one of those, but the only thing they can get is the dog. This is again the most popular breeds around the world, and we know LA, New York, and San Francisco, French Bulldogs are #1. And if it's true that maybe these celebrities think it's even more cool if you get one from Thailand or Japan or whatever, who knows, right? And then it's a welfare issue because so many of these dogs have welfare issue, health that's a problem. People are writing about it. French Bulldogs have taken over the internet, and we see that, and the craze for Frenchies being fueled by celebrity owners. This is a cool one, not welfare groups that are saying that organized crime is getting into selling puppies in Europe because it's so unregulated and they don't go to jail for it, and they can make a whack of money. Yeah?
Is part of this great increase also due to the colors that are not, that are not the normal colors being bred in? Because I know there's a whole lot of, AKC registers them, whether they're blue and Merle or whatever.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I don't have any data on that, but you're saying not only were they kind of special before, now they're really special. I don't know. Yeah.
I have a veterinary practice. Probably 90% of the dogs that I see are the standard colors.
Yeah.
I guess because these are recessive traits in the other colors, they're harder to breed. But they are, people pay a lot more for them, and I think you should probably incorporate them, but judge the dog on its muscularity, its structure, and color should be important. I don't see health problems related to it.
Yeah, I think it's a complex thing, and I don't think it's as simple as that. It might add into the problem, but the majority are probably the normal colors, or at least I don't know that. But when you see all these celebrities, I'm not seeing them with weird colors. They're the fawns and the brindles and that sort of thing. But it's crazy, right?
I work in a veterinary office, and I know you say the veterinarians are all concerned about it, but maybe Dorette gets it too, but like magazines come in like DVM and some of the other veterinary readable magazines, they always have French Bulldogs on the covers or in the pages, and it's like,
Clean up your act.
why are they doing,
Yeah, so
stop it.
yeah, so this slide is about a group called CRUFA, which is about controlling advertising and has been trying to promote advertisers within the veterinary industry and outside to stop using brachycephalic dogs in their advertising. FICAVA, which is the Federation of European Companion Animal Veterinary Associations, has come out with a position paper pushing that organizations and companies not do that. And we have to all, if anybody can lobby or leverage anybody, they need to do it. But you're quite right. I was at a meeting in Copenhagen. The veterinary profession has lagged behind. They're jumping in now, but they're doing things like, don't post cute pug pictures on your Facebook site, and the tongue's hanging out because they have no teeth, and isn't that funny? No, it's not funny. It's a welfare problem. And I don't have time today to go into the whole veterinary issue, but I can tell you it's heated up in Sweden and the UK and all over Europe with these position papers and calling on veterinarians on all these issues. And maybe what I'll do is I'll jump ahead for a minute to a slide that's absolutely relative to this. Because one of the things we think is the worst problem is this normalization. We know even in the veterinary data, the prevalence of breathing problems is not listed as high as it should be, because veterinarians say, oh, it's a pug. It's normal for a pug. It's not normal for dogs to make noise when they breathe at rest. It's not normal for dogs to snore and snort and choke on their soft palates. It's not normal for dogs to have eyes that bug out so far they can't stay wet and they get a lot of ulceration. It's not normal. It should be recorded in the veterinary record as a problem, and the people need to be informed that it's not okay. And veterinarians have been complicit in this, but so are breeders. This is normal for our breed. And if I can be very tough for a minute on you, as I understand it, a lot of you are okay that your dogs have a certain amount of hemivertebrae. I see that even though your standard says the dog has to have a tail, I see an awful lot of dogs in that ring that don't seem to have a tail. And there's extremities of size, shortness, bulk in the front that are all contributing in part of this BOAS. And so I'm blaming vets. I've probably done it too. This normalization is one of the biggest worries that we have, that we say it's okay. Sorry. Now, we have the opportunity to say, we think it's normal, we think it's okay. But you've probably seen other breeds. Jan was telling me about bulldogs where they have to have handlers sneaking in ice water for them to keep them cool so they don't fall over in the ring. Is that okay? Or has that crossed the line? And I think it's on everybody's shoulders to think about what's okay and what's not okay when it comes to health and welfare. And of course it's an issue that I'm not in with this group that want to blame it all on the standards. A lot of the standards don't preclude judging for moderate dogs. But a lot of the judges like the extreme wow factor dogs and something different. You all know how your breed has changed markedly in 100 years. So what's the right look for the French Bulldog? And how far have you gone? Now, I'm really excited about your performance people, because clearly you are finding in your population dogs that can run and jump and kill rats, which I never knew they were motivated to do that before, but good. And I think in the benefit of time, I think I'll just finish from here. I will probably do another podcast at some point, because I have a lot more information on how people are testing, how they're looking at brachycephalic and BOAS symptoms, and what you can do to find more moderate dogs and breed more moderate dogs. But of course, you have to be motivated to do it. And I come back to your motto: protect, promote, and preserve. What are you doing when you do an individual breeding that maybe you're doing because that dog will do well in the ring in the next couple of years because that look is really cool right now? Are you protecting your dogs and your puppies? Are you preserving this breed for the future? Because at the moment, it's not looking great. And I think if I go on here, we need this education, judges, breeders, owners, veterinarians, and I'll put up some of this information for you to read. But until we can convince people that the most desirable dog is a healthy dog with good welfare, we're going to be in trouble. And especially with this mass of the population buying 25,000 French Bulldogs and more, just because they look like what they look, and without perhaps enough knowledge about the challenges. So, and of course, what I have in here also is there's all of this is about people and what they want, and my husband is here with me, and he just said, my God, those people love those dogs, and the dogs are so, they make people feel great, right? Well, could we preserve what's great about the French Bulldog and not get hung up on whether it was a little longer, a little smaller, a little longer nose? Because what is it you're trying to preserve? What's the most important thing to preserve if you're going to keep French Bulldogs going, given all the challenges that are ahead of you? And I'm just going to move forward to this. One of the problems we also have is the veterinary position statement from FCAVA in Europe started from a group of veterinarians in Europe seeing the worst of the worst dogs coming in from Eastern Europe, and just spending their days seeing suffering dogs, brachycephalic dogs, suffering from breathing and eye and skin and all these other problems, and saying something must be done to improve the health and welfare of brachycephalic dogs. And as soon as that started to be a position paper, it became not just brachycephalic dogs, but all dogs with extreme conformation. So we're going to include German Shepherds in there, we're going to include really giant dogs in there and everything. And by the time it got written up, it's framed as the problem is selective breeding. This is the fault of everything. It lumps all purebred dogs, pedigree dogs into the same basket, and people, there's lots of people that are extreme out there that take it to the next level. Clearly we should outlaw breeding French Bulldogs or pugs, or maybe we should outlaw breeding all extreme dogs, or maybe we should just outlaw dog breeding because it's selective breeding that's bad. And we all know I am very firm in my knowledge of the benefits of different breeds of dogs. The human-animal bond is different for different people with different breeds, not even talking about functionality, but their appearance. There is a richness there. And there is a richness that we have with dogs with selective breeding. For example, this dog is a product of selective breeding. And this dog is a product of selective breeding that we have bred hunting and sniffing dogs that have phenomenal capabilities. And dogs that have the ability and endurance to go out and search and rescue. And I could go on with the characteristics that have been bred, not just about health, but about temperament and behavior and appearance. We don't want to throw everything away because people get really worked up about some of the big challenges. So I just encourage you to think about your own personal situation, how that relates to the breed as a whole and dogs as a whole. And I hope we can work together. And just to end on a slightly lighter note, maybe there's even other things that dogs can help us with as human beings. Because let's face it, we as humans, wouldn't be great to be living with no dogs. I don't think any of us want that. I wish we had more time to discuss, and I'm happy to stay for a while and take comments and questions.
Yeah, I mean, you've discussed the breed problems. It was in the purebred breed and the problems that are going overboard this way and that way and so on. But you haven't even begun to address the fact that the breeds are disappearing, because now the designer breeds are taking over those breeds, and in those breeds, in those combinations, they're A, not healthier, B, there's absolutely no health control, no genetic control left in there, not to mention what's going next. So that in itself also is becoming a huge problem.
Yes, and in many of my talks, I include what we know about the designer breeds and bring them in. I mean, people do it because they're cute, but they also have the perception that they're healthier. And we have statistics on mixed breed dogs, and they are, in terms of the breed stats I showed you, mixed breed dogs are healthier than French bulldogs in terms of requiring veterinary care and rate of death and everything.
I'm not comparing them to French bulldogs.
No,
I'm comparing them to dogs.
I understand totally, and there are designer breeders who would like to be part of breeding programs, and they would like to take responsibility for their dogs, and there are quite many of them starting to do genetic testing. But you're right that they don't have that. But I mean, I think that one of the problems that isn't addressed here, and we will have a stream at the Dog Health Workshop, is a vast number of dogs are coming from commercial breeders. And nobody wants to talk about them. We say, we're going to eliminate the puppy mills. I mean, maybe you can eliminate the worst of the worst. But where do you think these vast number of dogs are coming from? You know, whether it's the Doodles or the Puggles or the Wetsits, right? They're coming from an industry that is incredibly viable. And people in different parts of the world are looking at it as a bona fide agricultural process. I was just in Ireland. They have registered kennels that are on government programs for health management, and they're working with researchers, and they have over 528 breeding bitches in their organizations. And I can't prove the stats to you, but if you don't think that exists in the United States, I think you're dreaming. It's a huge industry here. So if we really want to help all the dogs, we have to understand where they're coming from and improve it. And of course, eliminating pet stores, everybody's like, pet stores are terrible, let's eliminate pet stores. But then you eliminated the ability to find these and track them back through brokers and stuff. And now it's on the internet. And now people say, I should have a rescue. And there's all these reports coming out of commercial breeders go, I can market it as a rescue. I have no problem to do that.
We're saying.
You know, and as much and more money. Absolutely.
They're claiming they're a rescue group,
Yeah.
and
Right.
who knows? Are they stealing people's dogs and like, oh, it's in rescue, and they're selling it to the next person, or they're going to shelters and taking out dogs and
Yeah, it's a crazy, crazy world.
trucking dogs up from the south and truckloads and meeting people in the Holiday Inn parking lot, and oh, this one's yours, and they've sold
Yeah.
bought them on the internet.
And it's about education, education, education. And I have to tell you, the scariest thing for me is that the show Pedigree Dogs Exposed came out in 2008. That really took the kennel clubs to task over purebred dog problems. And it was huge in Europe. And every welfare group and several government commissions in the UK had massive education programs between 2008 and 2012 and ongoing. Don't buy these dogs, they have health problems, they have sourcing problems, all this. I mean, unbelievable education. And that's the same time when the population went like that.
Have those education programs been effective at all?
But that's what I'm saying. During the same time, we've had this massive population explosion. So obviously, we're not trying to educate in the right way. And I think there's two things. Sometimes I say, people go, I don't know, I heard something about a pug. I think I'm supposed to buy one. I don't know. You know, I don't know. But I think we have some research, which I often talk about, but I don't have time today, where they go to people, even if they've had French Bulldogs, Chihuahuas, Cavaliers, and Cairn Terriers were in one study. And the people who bought Cairn Terriers said, one of the main reasons I bought a Cairn Terrier is I wanted a healthy dog. And the people in the other breeds, health didn't enter into it. Health didn't enter into it. They thought they were cute, they were popular, their kids wanted them, they thought they had a great personality, they were, you know, whatever. And then, oh yeah, health was down here. And some of them, even when they had a French Bulldog or a Chihuahua that cost them a lot of money because it was sick all the time, they still go, yeah, it was really hard on our family, but I'd probably get another one. Except for the ones where it was so extreme, they're like, I can't ever do this again. And there are stories on the internet. So we have to find what motivates people, you know. I mean, it's like, I don't know, taking a young guy who wants a Harley Davidson and saying, no, you should get a moped because they get better gas mileage. And that guy's going, gas mileage is not the main criteria I'm looking for here. I want something that looks big and scary and makes a really big noise, you know? And so just saying, better gas mileage, better gas mileage, better gas mileage. You can scream it from the rooftops. If better gas mileage isn't what he's looking for, it's not going to change his buying behavior. So somehow in the way we're trying to educate people, don't buy them, don't buy them. They're sick, they have bad welfare. Maybe people go, I'm a really kind person. I will go buy the sick dog, the sick breed, because I am so good. I am happy to take care of it. And I can walk down the street proud. And you go, no, the vets in the room know some of the scary stuff on the internet about people with dogs that dearly need to be euthanized, but I'm a good dog parent, you know. And so there's so much going on here. And all I can tell you is there's research going on in all these angles. We're trying to bring it together on the internet. We're trying to find a way to support the breed clubs and people like you in the best way while we're looking at these bigger picture issues that are going on around you that are going to impact you. So if any of you have thoughts, you've seen articles that are interesting, please share them with me. I'm really happy to benefit from your expertise and experience. And now forget everything I said and go celebrate the beautiful dogs. Thank you.